Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a Premier Field Engineer focused on management technologies. Today's discussion will be reviewed to look at kind of end-to-end of power management in Configuration Manager current branch. So I should say from the outset that power management really hasn't changed significantly or really at all from previous releases, yet it's a very important component of Config Manager in terms of helping businesses track the money spent on power, being able to try to reduce that in a planned way, and so forth. That's built in to Config Manager. So, a very useful tool to at least understand what it is, how it works, and how to configure and set it up. So that is the goal of this session. So here's our agenda. I want to talk about the whys of power management. I already alluded a bit to some. Talk about the requirements for power management. Go through some setup and config. Do some demos in there, but then also actually show a power management setting in place on a system and talk about tracing a bit, and then we'll be done. Right? Not a real long session, but a good thing to understand. So why power management? Well, businesses of all types are out there using PCs and using, in some cases, lots of PCs, and those PCs are consuming power. And the users may have received instruction from leadership of those businesses to either turn the computers off at night or leave them on, leave them on, or whatever, right? But having users actually try to implement whatever the policy is, that's a bit hit and miss. And so what could be a mechanism to bring order to the chaos is some sort of central place to manage it. So that's tile 3. Config Manager, really good place for management. It's what it's built for, is management, and the settings native to Config Manager. If we can get a handle on enforcing the policies the business wants for power, then there could be cost savings that are a result of it. So there probably are more reasons too. Those are a few that came to mind. So in terms of requirements for this, there are a few, right? There are external requirements, and then there are Config Manager requirements themselves. So let's start with the external requirements. So the systems. We have today's computing world, both physical and virtual systems. Virtual systems aren't really supported. Doesn't mean they won't work. I know that certain ones of these settings will work on virtual machines and so forth. Virtual machines probably weren't tested so much, but doesn't mean you can't apply a power setting to them that you might want to, right? If it makes sense to do that. Have a couple of customers who've done that, quite successfully. Then we have physical systems, and we have both servers and workstations. So servers really generally aren't in scope for power management, though there are some interesting scenarios where enforcing power settings on servers could be interesting. So, for example, making sure that your virtual machine host, runs with the high performance profile or whatever it is, instead of balanced or whatever. Sometimes there are reasons to enforce power settings on servers. Certainly, we're not looking to put servers to sleep, right? And hibernate mode and things of that nature. Those kinds of things really are more workstations, and really workstations are the primary focus of power management. Again, not to say the others won't be able to be configured if you so choose to do that, right? Just test it out yourself and see, but workstations certainly are in scope, physical workstations. In terms of the hardware requirements to get the full set of capabilities delivered to you, your hardware needs to support sleep, hibernate, wake from sleep, and wake from hibernate mode. We'll be able to tell you in reporting which of these your hardware actually does support, right? So some older systems, you could have some differences between hardware platforms and so forth. Then operating systems. So largely the settings between operating systems will be consistent. There could be some differences. I haven't seen any from Windows 7 to 8 to 10. Haven't dug into all of them for sure. And I know there were from XP to 7. And so just be aware there could be some OS level differences that you'll come across and such, right? So if we have something we're trying to enforce and the OS doesn't allow us to or doesn't have that built in, it will just be ignored, right? And then in ConfigMgr, there are a couple of prerequisites, hardware inventory and the reporting services point. In most environments, these are already turned on, right? So what do we use hardware inventory for? We will want to build collections to help us manage our power management deployments and environment and so forth, right? So we can use hardware inventory for that. In fact, I'll show you that here in just a second. The report detail that we get from reporting is driven by hardware inventory. So actually, I'll save the hardware inventory for a minute, but the classes, there are several that are created or collected by hardware inventory. All right, what about setup in config? So really, as we think about setting up and configuring power settings, we really encourage you to take a phased approach to it. So these are the three phases: monitoring and planning, enforcement, and compliance. So in the monitoring and planning phase, here what we really want to do is kind of enable power management so that it's out there and inventory can collect details about how the power is running. You know, we really want to do this in a way that, or at a time and such sample, during a representative time, so we kind of establish our baseline, right? We can use our power management reports to help us understand what's happening in the environment. The reports, I'll mention this probably again, the reports leverage hardware inventory data, but not all of the reports, as you will see as I go through them, will have data in them immediately, right? I've had my lab set up for doing this session for a few days, and that's certainly not long enough to allow data to be collected to populate all of the reports. Some of the reports use summarized data, so they collect it over time, kind of summarize it out and present it to you. And until you have that time frame go by, 30 days, usually 31 days, you're not going to have data in some of these reports. Doesn't mean it's broken. The data is being collected. It's just not visible until we can do the work on it, the summarization work and so forth, right? So enforcement is that portion where we're actually have seen what's going on in the environment. We've developed a plan to actually manage the power settings in the environment, and we've implemented that plan. I almost said deployed. You don't deploy anything with power settings. Power settings is something that's configurable on collections. And so the systems in those collections, as you will see, will actually get the power settings by being members of those collections, right? Then there's the compliance phase. And the compliance phase is, where we're just seeing how the system's running and, making sure that we're staying in compliance with what we've configured and reaping the results and tracking and so forth, right? Okay. So let's get into the meat of it. How do we actually set up and configure power settings? Well, there's really three places, right? The first is that we need to create some collections that will help us kind of split up the environment and make sense of the environment in terms of power settings. There are 5 that are recommended in the TechNet documentation. You might actually need more. You might not choose to use exactly what we've kind of brought forward, but the 5 are really, we want a power management baseline reporting collection. This is where we're implementing power settings. We're not really implementing any controls on power settings, but we're doing it in such a way that that we're learning about the environment, developing a baseline, and so forth, right? Then we have power management excluded. There will be some systems that you want to exclude from power management altogether, right? That might be a call center that's running 24/7. You don't want those systems to probably go to sleep or whatever it is, right? There will be power management incapable. There will be systems that are not capable of being managed through power management. And I'll show you an example of that, as we go forward. Power management, no assigned plans. Maybe you want to know, are there systems there that I'm intending to manage, but they just don't have any assigned power plans? That can happen, and so having a collection to track those systems is interesting. And then power management with assigned plans. So we can at least see that power plans are assigned to systems where we intend. There could be others. There could be, as I'll get to here in a minute, systems that you want the user to be able to control whether they adhere to the power management policies. And so you have systems specifically in a collection there, and you apply the appropriate settings from client settings to them so that they get that option. And there may be other systems that you don't want the user to have any choice in the power management settings, right? There's a number of different combinations. These are, 5 to kind of get you started, kind of get you thinking, right? In terms of collections, we can do them in a couple of ways. We could do direct members. That's what I've done in my lab. That's not really scalable and probably not something you want to do in production. Or you can do query-based. In order to do query-based, then we need to have the available hardware classes to help us make sense of the environment. So let me pull in the lab real quick and just show you the hardware classes we have. So here are my collections. I didn't even do all 5 of them. I'm just doing some for the demo here, right? And I can go in. These are all direct membership. I'll just pick one. I can go in, look at properties, and then go to membership rules and add a query-based criteria. I'm not going to save it, but I will actually walk through it. Okay, so membership rules direct right now. I will add a query-based. So I'll just call it test. And then I will go and edit the query statement. And then notice under the criteria, as soon as it comes up, I will hit the starburst. Start it up. All right, select. And I will first choose the appropriate class. Oops. So here are a number of power management classes that you can actually choose to use in building your collections, and you can pick whichever makes the most sense in your environment. So power settings is one, and you can go through and basically see what's applied, if one's applied, the GUID, name ID, whatever, and so forth, right? I won't go into it, but you get the idea. And so these are populated by hardware inventory once you kind of enable power settings and enable kind of the tracking on a system and so forth. Then you will have data in these classes that you can leverage. Okay. All right. So what else? Right. There's the client settings, and in the client settings, you need to enable power management. Now, enabling power management in client settings does not turn on power management, meaning it makes it possible for you to configure power settings, power policy. Without it, nothing you would do would actually become effective, right? Once you configure power settings. But turning it on in the collections doesn't really implement it, which is interesting, right? Because that's why in the default the default client settings, power management is in fact enabled, right? So if you choose to enable power management for your entire enterprise, then that's great. You already have it turned on, and the clients are capable of participating in power management. You may not want to enable power management for your entire enterprise, and so if that's the case, then definitely create a custom power management client settings, and you can put it out. So here I have my environment, and first we'll just go to client settings. I have my default client settings, and I can go in here, and I can go down to power management, and you'll see it's enabled by default, right? So if you don't want to apply or enable power management for your entire enterprise, you will want to come here and turn this off in the default client settings, and then use a custom client setting to enable it, right? So let's go into my custom. So mine's enabled in both places, but I will go into my custom and look at the setting. I only have one setting here. And so power management, a couple of things to note here. First, power management is allowed on devices, right? So that's the first gateway we have to pass through. Number two, whether or not to allow users to change or opt out of client settings, right? So this is one that you may or may not want to do, depending on your user population. Could be that you want to do it for some and not for others, right? So for my machine, the Microsoft IT folks have allowed us to opt out of client settings. It's in Software Center. So let me just go to my Windows 7 machine, jump ahead to it, and go to Software Center, and show it to you. Right. All right, here's Software Center. And it's just in the options area. So this is the old style Software Center. It's in the new one too, just a little bit different. And under Power Management, we have an option to it'll expand. Come on, expand. Yeah, to do not apply power settings from IT to this machine. So some systems may be worthy of allowing this user or the user the choice. So in the case of my laptop, I run my ConfigMgr lab on it. I have some things that need to run for overnight so that I can get some processing done and be ready to take the next step in a test the next day or something. I definitely don't want my machine going to sleep at night if, in fact, I need it to be up and running and processing some sort of test. So, thankfully, Microsoft IT allows me to opt out of the power settings, and that's where I can do it, right? And that's where this applies. Every now and then I'll notice my system go to sleep, and I'll go back in, and that option is not checked. And so, that tells me there was probably a new version of something that was put on there that reset it and so forth. But at least it's there and available, right? Then there's this option to enable Wake Up Proxy. Now, Wake Up Proxy is something that was newly added in 2012, and it's really not something I'm going to dive into deeply here. It uses unicast. Basically, it's kind of like a Wake on LAN technology, but what it does is it kind of picks a system on the subnet where you're trying to do the wake up to actually take control and send those unicast packets for you, right? Again, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it. It can be effective with power policy and waking up and that kind of thing, but make sure you know what you're getting into whenever you do it, and you're aware of the required configurations and so forth, right? Then we have the port for Wake Up Proxy, and then the firewall rules and so on, and on we go, right? So that's really all I'm going to do in terms of configuring power policy in my custom client settings. Once I have, like anything, my custom client settings configured, I need to deploy it to make sure that it's actionable. So this one is deployed to nobody. That's interesting. So that's actually a mistake on my part. Mine is enabled because the default is enabled. So what I should have done is deployed this to my collection. Oops, sorry. I should have deployed this to my collection that that is enabled, right? So that's a step I missed. I didn't even know about it until now because this other one was turned on, right? So no harm, no foul. Everything's working, okay? All right. So beyond beyond client settings, what do we need to do to configure? To configure and actually make power settings workable in the environment, we actually have to go back to our collections that we built and enable power settings on the collections where we want them to apply. All right. Now, there are a few options that you're going to see in here. One is that you can have a collection just like we talked about over here, where you completely exclude power management, and that's a setting, and you can do that. And if you set a collection to have all systems exclude power management, and then you have a machine that's in the exclude collection and also in a collection where power management policy is being applied, it will not be applied to that machine. Exclude wins, right? That's a note. You want to be careful to manage your collections so that you don't have duplicates in collections, very similar to maintenance windows. But if you do, we do have some algorithms and logic to handle them and so forth, right? We'll get to that in a second. Then there's the power plan settings on the collection you'll see in just a minute. There are the ability to define what your business hours are and then set a different policy, a different power policy for during business hours and outside business hours and so forth. The general strategy, again, I mentioned maintenance windows, very similar to maintenance windows. In maintenance windows, the idea is that you have collections that are dedicated to applying maintenance windows in your environment. You shouldn't be deploying anything to those collections. They are simply standalone for the purpose of applying maintenance windows. Same thing is true for power management. So you really want one collection per plan that you're deploying in a given condition. Again, there's a number of ways that we can set up our collection based on needs, but the idea, I'll say it this way, you don't want a machine to get more than one power plan setting, generally, right? I can't really imagine a scenario where you would. Okay, sometimes it can happen by mistake, and we handle those kinds of things. So for example, if you do have a conflict in power management settings, so if you have machines in two collections and they're getting two power settings policies, the Config Manager client will process through them and apply the least restrictive option, right? Because again, power settings, if the thought is if we have a power setting applied to us that's less restrictive than another, we want to give that policy, to the system instead of locking it down maybe more than we intend. And the other, there's an option here called wake time, right? And so that's applicable really only to desktop computers. We don't want to, wake up a laptop in a bag somewhere and make it overheat and or make it run out of battery or whatever, right? So wait time is specifically something that applies to desktop computers, but if it's possible, you could get more than one wait time applied by having this machine be a member of multiple collections. So if you have a duplicate policy there, then the one that is closest to midnight will actually win, right? And there's a report for displaying systems that have multiple power plans configured, and you can track it that way and so forth, right? But that's kind of how we handle it. Okay, so let's actually pull the lab in and look at those power settings. So if I go to my assets and compliance and look back at my collection, I could do any one of them. In fact, I'll just start with my excluded, right? So this exclusion trumps everything. And so if a system is in the excluded collection, they just won't get anything applied to them. So power management here, normally it's just don't configure it. All of the collections by default don't specify any configuration. Here, never allow configuration. So that's going to overrule everything, right? And then in my enabled collection, I actually do set power policy. And so I'll come in here and we'll walk through it a bit. We'll come back to this in a minute, but here's my power configuration. So whenever I say I want to apply a power policy, now these light up. So I have a choice of specifying what my peak operational time is. Now again, all of these, you could have collections where you specify things like this differently for different sets of computers. That's fine. It's perfectly doable if you want to do something like that. We'll calculate the duration of that window for you, and then you can actually configure different power settings for peak versus non-peak times, right? So this is a custom power setting. You cannot change our defaults. So from the drop-down, we do offer you some defaults. You notice the name ends in Config Manager, so you can tell on the client that it is a Config Manager generated policy. And here are the policies for this particular default profile. You can't really tell, but I'm trying to click on these items. You can tell the check mark is not going away, nor am I really able to change anything here. I'm clicking, and I can click up here at times and such. Doesn't really make a difference at all because these are default power policies. If you don't want to use our default power policies, that's great. You can create your own, and only in the creation of your own can you actually specify a particular power policy. So let me go ahead in here, since I'm here anyway, and show you what I have set up. So specifically, I have configured that I want this power policy to not cause the machine to go to sleep ever. So I just removed these check marks. I'm not going to be applying any policy in this area, so the machine won't ever have an option to go to sleep, whether it's on battery or plugged in or whatever. It won't have any option to turn off the display. Another one that I set up was the lid, the lid action. What do I want to do? Do nothing, right? The default is to go to sleep, right? Well, I have my systems sitting in my lab back at the office, and it could be that someone would be coming by, a cleaning person, whoever accidentally closed the lid. That would put these systems to sleep. I don't want that. I want those systems to be available to me if I need them to be, and so I set that policy to do nothing, right? So that policy, I don't have to deploy it. I have effectively deployed it by the fact that it's on this collection, so the machines in this collection will get it applied. But besides that, there's no particular way or need to deploy anything. Okay, so that's configuring a power policy. You can see all the different options that could come to play on this, right? So moving ahead, let's actually, before we get to the client and actually see that power policy, another big component, really important component of power management is reporting. So under monitoring, we have reports, and we have a category of reports called specifically power management. So there are some of these, like energy consumption, that will be very important to you in terms of understanding what your baseline energy consumption is, what your energy consumption is after applying your power settings, being able to demonstrate the value of doing that. I can go in and I'll specify a start date. I'll just do it arbitrarily because I know there's no data here for me. And then I can specify an end date, and I'll just choose this one since it's in the future. And I can specify a collection. Here I want to use the ones that are enabled. And then I can say all data. So I can go view the report. The report will churn, and we will get nothing in it. Right? Nothing is going to be here. So why is nothing going to be here? So remember, I said some of these reports require that we have summarized data, 31 days worth of data or so forth, to actually make some calculations. Even the energy consumption by day report, that's true of. So this lab has not been set up for power management for that long, and so there's no data in these reports. Yet we're collecting data all the time. I do have machines that are in here, that are in the report. So let me run this one. Oops, my apologies. I wanted to run the other one. I want to run the power capabilities report, right? And I'll run it two ways. So I'll run this first on my collection of systems that are enabled for power management. So there are two systems in this collection. One is a physical laptop and one is a virtual machine. So, and I want to pull back, the specific details, show all, and hit OK. And view report, and we will see one machine here. You see that there's two in the collection, one machine because that's my physical laptop, and already mentioned virtual machines aren't really in scope. We can do some things with them, but not really in scope. And you can see, sleep capable, hibernate capable. Those aren't things that apply to a virtual machine, so that one's filtered out. But for this physical machine, absolutely, right? This is a physical laptop. It's able to do all of the different phases that we need it to do. You can confirm that here. I can go to my other collection, which is a system I know is not capable of power management. It actually is a physical system. But notice, or you won't know this, but it's going to come back. It's going to display the results for that physical system. It is not capable of any of this. Now, this is interesting, right? Because this physical system is running a server OS. That physical system, I can put it to sleep, no problem. I can hibernate it, no problem. The point is, we don't anticipate doing that for a server OS. And so server OSs, even if the hardware is capable, we're not going to list those things as possible for that server OS because we just don't intend that servers would actually have that action happen on them. Okay? All right, so let's pull this out. Oops, go back. So just to finish this up, so I've shown you how I've configured my power policies on ConfigMgr side. I've shown you the options for it. Now I've got them deployed to my collection, or they're deployed because of the systems in the collection. Let's go down to my physical machine and just look at this for a second. Right? So in order to tell that I have these power policies applied, I can go to Control Panel and I can scroll down to Power. There we go. For some reason, there it is. Okay, I wasn't landing on it with my eyes for a second. And so you can tell right away that the config manager policy is the one that's actually on this system, because the power policy in place is my config manager power policy. So if I go look at it, I had told that I did not want to manage turning off the display or putting the system to sleep. So that is in effect. It's never going to be put to sleep or the display turned off regardless of condition. Then I can go look at my advanced options. The other one that I configured is what to do with a lid closed. So I can open that up and look at this. And the default is to go to sleep, but I've configured do nothing. So the system just keeps running, right? There's a number of other settings in there that you can configure, probably would want to, about how long to keep the system alive and so forth. I will say, this is a physical piece of hardware. So I did configure a wake-up timer for it. But this is also a laptop, right? So a laptop, again, we are not going to force a laptop to wake up at a particular time. For systems, desktop computers that we do wake up, right? There's a mechanism in Config Manager to monitor. So we wake them up for the purpose of letting Config Manager's jobs do whatever's pending, right? And while there's work going on, while there's work going on the system in Config Manager, there's little packets that are sent in, or instructions that are sent in to keep the system alive or keep it awake. Once we finish our work, then the system can be configured to go back to sleep. Right? Now, there's no option to say go to sleep after, kind of thing, or go to sleep at a specific time. That's not there. But what you can do is say hibernate after a particular amount of time of inactivity, right? So after Config Manager quits sending its notifications saying stay awake, when it's finished with its work, if you configure the power policy to do so, the system will go right back to sleep after a period of time. Right? So it's a pretty interesting solution for preserving power usage on desktops specifically. Right? You can configure hibernate settings on laptops too. We just don't wake them up. Okay. So in terms of the logs, there's a couple of interest. Certainly, the other logs that are out there. We have once we have the power settings applied, there's policy that's created. The system has to get the policy and apply the policy and all that. Those are processes that are common between components. So the power management specifically, I set up a power management policy to get all that done, right? And so you can actually see with the timestamp 4:53 in the afternoon is whenever I did this, you can actually see the break in activity, and you can kind of walk through and see the things that have changed. You can kind of walk through all of these, and there's a couple of things near the end. We're defining our peak start time, peak end time, applying the actual configuration up here, so it's in the form of a package ID. All that's in the logs. You can see, you can confirm, different settings in the logs. Then we have, in addition to the power agent log, we have the power provider. And the power provider it's a little bit more cryptic. It's got a bunch of GUIDs in it, but you can absolutely see the GUIDs that are kind of being applied. There's ways to interpret these in the database. You can get a good sense of what's going on. The other log that I captured is really essentially the same thing. The only thing I want to show you differently is in the log, we do show you, I think it's this log, we do show you that maybe it's the other log. Hang on, let me go to the other log. I always get these confused. Power agent. Yeah, so this one is where I set a wake-up timer. And it basically says that setting is going to be ignored. It doesn't take place on laptops. We're detecting the system as a laptop. It is. And so this particular setting is seen, but is filtered and is ignored, right? So the log's really good places to be able to understand what's happening. Besides the logs, there are settings in WMI for power, and they're in two places. One is just simply in the policy, whenever the policy comes down. So we can go to root, CCM, policies, or policy, machine, let me scroll over. Yeah, machine, and then actual config. And if we scroll down a little bit to ccm_p for power, you will see the power settings in here. So probably looking right past it. Let's see, go up a little bit. Yeah, no, power config. Power config and power management client. So both of these classes are there. They contain data. You can look through them, see the config, right, and so forth, no problem. The major one that people probably want to know about as well, probably seen it already, is this power management agent class, where you can go through and you can see the different details. So I mentioned that we need to summarize data. The data is actually being collected. It's in these classes in WMI. It's just not visible until we can actually summarize it and so forth. And then the last thing that I will show you as we kind of wrap up is in the registry. So if I go into the registry, all right, and then scroll down, I've already got it in focus. There is a, at this path, local machine software, Microsoft, CCM, Power Agent, there's an entry that tells you which active policy is there. Now, it's a GUID, so it's not going to give you the name, but it's certainly possible to trace that back and confirm, which particular power policy that is. If something maybe didn't apply correctly, maybe something wasn't retrieved through policy, you're wondering why it didn't change, you can go here to confirm which power policy actually is active, on the system. And so with that said, that's kind of a walkthrough. Not a hugely complex component, a really useful component perhaps, more complex to actually implement it in the environment and so forth. Setting it up's not hard. Take a look at it, right? It could be beneficial for you, help you save some money in terms of power, do the right thing for just not wasting electricity and so forth. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap this up and we will see you next time.